Honorable Chairperson of Himalayan Research Institute, respected Chair, panelists, guests, and audiences of two evenings program, Secretary, other office bearers, and honorable members of Shri and sister organizations like Vidya Vihar Group of Institutions, a very good evening to you all. I welcome you all to evening's discussion program on the book Dreams of a Healthy India, Democratic Healthcare in Post-COVID Times, edited by Professor Ritu Priya and Dr. Syeda Hameed. First of all, I would like to devote few words for today's host, the Himalayan Research Institute. It is also popularly known as Shri, which is headquartered in Purnia, Bihar. The institute is dedicated to research, discourses, education, and general welfare of people, society, and culture in sub-Himalayan region. A multidimensional institute, Shri formulates ideas, undertakes empirical studies, theorizes and disseminates knowledge through research, seminars, webinars, summits, lectures, training, workshops, and publications. Founded in late 2018, the institute has accomplished more than 5 years of its voice. It has been able to take up various activities during these years involving research projects, training and workshops, research affiliation programs, innovating scientific equipments, development dialogues, memorial lectures, national international webinars and conferences, and bilateral summits, debates and discussions, supporting just movements for development of sub-Himalayan region and book discussion, etc. Latter is a regular feature and institute boasts of organizing discussions on books of eminent writers across the length and breadth of the country on significant issues and subject matters from different fields. We would like to inform that several distinguished personalities who have achieved tremendously in their field of work across the globe have come on Shri's platform in different ways in these years. The Institute intends to take up more such activities in days ahead. Now I would like to present the highlights of today's program. To evening, we have Professor Ratnewshwar Mishra as chair, Professor Ritu Priya and Dr. Syeda Hameed as presenter, Amarjeet Sinha, Dr. Chandrakant Lahariya and Dr. Priyanka Yadav as eminent panelists. First, Ritu Priya ji and Syeda ji will reflect on their book, which is the focus of two evenings discussion program. It will be followed by panelist views and comments. We would also love to listen to the views of authors who have contributed different chapters in the book. Thereafter, we would have an open question answer session. Then the chair of the program, Professor Mishra, would enlighten us. The program will end up with a vote of thanks. Now I would like to devote few words for the editors of the book under discussion today. Professor Ritu Priya is a medical graduate and community health researcher. She has served at the Center of Social Medicine and Community Health, JNU. Ritu Priya ji has been associated with several well-known and prestigious organizations such as National Rural Health Mission, Planning Commission, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, National AIDS Control Organization, Department of Ayush and ICMR, etc. in various capacities. She has several books and articles to her credit, including the edited volume, Dialogue on AIDS, Perspective from the Indian Context, and book titled Lok Swasth Mein Samagrata Ki Khoj. Hats off to you, ma'am. We wholeheartedly welcome you on board. Dr. Syeda S. Hameed is a feminist writer, actively engaged in public affairs and social issues, especially for women, minorities, and peace. She has been member of the Planning Commission of India and National Commission for Women. Syeda ji is the founder member of several well-known organizations such as the Muslim Women Forum and Women's Initiative for Peace in South Asia, etc. She has several interesting works published to her credit. Dr. Syeda has received several prestigious awards, including Padam Shri. Kudos to you, ma'am. A warm welcome on the Shri's platform. One of the distinguished panelists on board today is Amarjeet Sinha. He has almost 40 years of experience in government, largely in the rural and social sector, and retired as Secretary, Department of Rural Development, Government of India. Amarjeet ji has a lifetime commitment to work for transforming lives and livelihoods of the deprived households. He has played major role in several government flagship programs such as National Rural Health Mission, Sarv Shiksha and Gram Swaraj Abhiyans, etc. In fact, he is also known as the architect of NRHM. Sir has the distinction of having traveled to over 95% of India's districts to promote human development initiatives. He has published several books and articles on public policy. Amarjeet ji has taught and lectured extensively in public policy schools across India. He has received several scholarships and awards. Presently, Sir is a senior fellow at the CSEP, New Delhi. Bravissimo, sir. We are glad to have you on board today. Another prominent panelist on board is Dr. Chandrakant Lahariya. Dr. Lahariya is a medical doctor and India's leading health policy and global health expert. He has been associated with several reputable organizations such as WHO and UNICEF, etc. Chandrakant ji has written and published extensively in scientific journals and newspapers. He has been listed as top 2% global researchers in the field of clinical medicine. Dr. Lahariya has been engaged and involved in drafting of India's National Health Policy 2017. He has received multiple awards and is widely respected for his social sector work. We welcome you into evening's program, sir. Another eminent discussant on our board today is Dr. Priyanka Yadav. She has been assistant professor at the Center for Policy Research in Higher Education, NIPA. Dr. Priyanka has earned her PhD from CPS, JNU. She works in the domain of the political economy of healthcare in India. Dr. Priyanka has also worked on Mohalla clinics. You are also welcome, ma'am. Once again, we wholeheartedly welcome our entire adorable, distinguished guests into evening's discussion program. We feel privileged to have all of you here today, sir. Thank you. Now, it's over to our chair of the program, Mishra, sir.
After Dr. Raman has welcomed each of you, I also feel privileged to welcome you again in this discussion, the two editors, the 3 or 4 panelists, and all others who are participating in any manner. I welcome them all. I hand over to Raman for conducting the proceedings, and Dr. Raman will ensure who speaks after whom. I will speak my mind only at the end. Please, Ramanji, it's over to you.
Thank you, sir. Now, we would like to invite, with the chair's permission, we would like to invite Professor Ritu Priya ji to reflect on the book. Ma'am, you are welcome.
Dr. Can I suggest that we ask Syeda ji to speak first? She'll give the broad context of the book and then I'll come into the issues.
No problem, ma'am. Ma'am Syeda, ma'am, you are welcome. You are invited on the board, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Ritu, you have, I don't know why you put me forward, because you are the person under whose privileged guidance that I have done this book. And really, you have done the bulk of the work. So anyway, since you have ordered, I'm here. And thank you so much, Dr. Raman. You have been very, you've been reminding us, and you've been wonderful. And all the other panelists and the audience and all the friends who are here. So I'm just going to briefly, I asked Dr. Ritu Priya this morning that how should I structure, and then I made my notes according to what she suggested. So first of all, about Samruddh Bharat Foundation. And so we started in 2018. So we have been for, I think, 7 years, we have been in the field. And basically, we recognized what were India's present and future challenges and how we could meet and rise up to them. We made a few working groups for encouraging a transformative spirit in India's polity. We invited about 400 foremost academics, activists, professionals, and engaged in this process. It was a long, drawn-out process, so I just want to briefly go through it. And to further disseminate these ideas and kickstart a national dialogue and build consensus, we thought and implemented 14 volumes highlighting innovative ideas to deepen and further the promise of India. So it's very ambitious, but we attempted to do that. And our solutions were disruptive. Each one of the pressing challenges that we are collectively facing. And this was a Rethinking India series. The first volume was Vision for a Nation, Paths and Perspectives. So this was the overarching volume. Diverse communities were taken in consideration. And these were, of course, the communities which needed most of all our concentration and attention: Dalits, Bahujans, OBCs, women, minorities. Now, for a distinguished audience like this, I can only say, and you understand very well, what the volumes offer are navigable roadmaps, how we may overcome the many specific challenges we are facing, guiding us towards new ways of working cooperatively to rise above our differences, heal the wounds, and in our communities, the wounds in our communities, and recalibrate our modes of governance and revitalize our institution. Now, this is a long sentence and it has many nuances. But again, you understand what kind of a challenge we encountered. More than that, to construct India of our imagination, our aspirations, and India reflected in our constitutional preamble. So that being so important, that being so significant, that whereby the 14 volumes that we managed to bring out, that was the path that we endeavored. In the book that Dr. Ritu, Priya, and I, we edited and we wrote our respective articles, and we Dr. Ritu, Priya did the bulk of the work, but I was, a second handle. For me, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. So I'm a social activist, and I'm basically, a writer, an imaginative kind of a person. So I started off the book with a couplet of Allama Iqbal. And I have to read it out to you, और आप तो समझ ही जाएंगे कि उसका मतलब क्या है, मगर मैं उसका मतलब भी बता देती हूँ. And Dr. Allama Iqbal says, मकामे शौक तेरी कुत्सियों के बस में नहीं. The destination is not, he's addressing God, and he's saying the destination is not up to your angels. मकामे शौक तेरी कुत्सियों means angels. तेरे कुत्सियों के बस में नहीं, उन्हीं का काम है ये जिनके हौसले हैं बुलंद. This is the work of the people who have high aspirations. So this is a lot of Farsi and a lot of Urdu, but basically the aspirations of the people are, super and are even more imaginative and even more respected than the attempts of the angels. So what I encountered, and I'm just going to give you very briefly my own what struck me was, when I toured, and of course, like Amarjeet, I also went to every nook and corner wherever I could go, like a mad person, every area that I could go to, and of course not all areas, but many areas. So what I encountered was that the common people, the women, the Adivasis, the semi-literate, if they are brought in the health paradigm, they can work miracles. And I'm going to give you some examples. I will give you one example is a place, Raleigh Siddhi in Ahmednagar district. A man called Dr. Antia. He established it in Pune, and the women are empowered with knowledge about basic health hygiene and educated about RTI, and they act as agents of change. Now, this is all a lot of, words and so on. But having witnessed it, village women sitting under peepal trees, basically training, and in Ayurveda, in Unani, in home remedies, women from villages speaking up, the trees surrounding them with RTI notices hanging. And this was an amazing, in Raleigh Siddhi, that it changed the whole health scenario. Now I'm going to go on. There is a place, and I'm sure you know it, Amarjeet would definitely know it. It's a place called Gadchiroli, which is in Vidarbha district and Maharashtra, and where we visit, when I went a couple of times to Gadchiroli, and there is a Society for Education and Society for Education and Research, and these two individuals, Abhay and Rani Bang, really did a miracle there. The search experiment, and it was called SEARCH, Society for Education, Action and Research. SEARCH experiment has done much more than saving lives of babies. It has forever changed not only the babies, but the mothers. Ordinary women doing extraordinary things. This was what struck me the most. And I wrote a book called Beautiful Country Stories from Another India. So those were my stories. I mean, ordinary women doing extraordinary traditional practices. Like, for example, in a little village, in a little village hovel, where the woman was after she had given birth, the infections, the placenta was placed in a pit, and she was not allowed to go out. She had to defecate. So this is something which they were able to overcome this. And even the fact that instead of breast milk, they were fed Gurpani. Okay. Then this was one. Then my other important, and I'm just quoting a few, in Ganyari in Bilaspur in Chhattisgarh, Jan Swasthya Sahyog. It was close to the Achanak Mar National Park. The Adivasis, the Begas, the Gonds, the Manjis, the Orans, the Kols, all of them, and they're wearing, they're dressed in their traditional garments, in their traditional clothes and traditional jewelry, but they are working miracles. So they were drafted, and there were creches, Fulwaris, again an experiment. Trained new literate and illiterate women were trained as health workers. Low-cost technologies. This is amazing. Like rupees 2 and 3 and at the most 40 rupees for small procedures. 40 rupees. Okay. So that's Ganyari. And Ganyari was a microcosm of rural India. It is in the vast expanse of rural India where a majority of Indians live that the battle against disease will be won or lost. So for me, that is also a very, very important aspect. And patients were treated as partners, school buses and children as couriers to drop and pick up malaria slides. I mean, this was the innovative ways in which they drew and draw from the community what the community can yield. Then in Dibrugarh, Assam, there was an Akha ship of hope. Who thinks about the chars in Assam? Who thinks about the chars in Assam, how to get the health to those remote areas? And this is a center for Northeast studies. And there was a ship of hope. And it had taken healthcare to the forgotten people of riverine islands of Dibrugarh, Dhemaji, Tinsukia districts of Upper Assam. So that was another, a miracle. Then there was Phek in Nagaland. There was Sitlingi in Dharmapuri in Tamil Nadu, where a very dedicated Dr. Kapil Regi George and Dalita Regi helped to the remotest area, even discovering, for example, in the process, discovering lambada embroidery. So that there was a means of livelihood. There was another experiment, and that was another important and extremely significant one in Dakshai in Himachal, in Solan, in a place called Dakshai in Solan in Himachal, where there was an organization, a very small, but by a single person who happened to be a very close relative of mine, called Ehsas. And Ehsas means sensitivity, feeling. And there he brought health to all these people, including this person who's a very close relative, gave up very, very big, very well-paying jobs in the city, and then, devoted himself to Solan, to Dakshai, and to treat those children who were, brought as guest laborers from other parts in Bihar and in places like Bihar and UP, and bring health to them. So I think that for me, the miracle was that, these were the people who would not be drafted for healthcare. They had no degrees, they had no qualification, but these imaginative people who gave up big jobs in big cities, and then they decided that yes, we are going to use the existing resources that we have, and then we will try to change, and we'll try to bring health where health was simply not existing. So I just want to sort of give this my own experience, and being not a doctor, but it touched my heart, and that's where Beautiful Country, Stories from Another India, that is where the imagination was in form of a book. So that, and then this Dreams of a Healthy India. So that's all I want to say, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, ma'am. With the permission of the chair, now we request Ritu Priya ma'am to come on the board.
Thank you, Dr. Raman, and to SHRI for organizing this whole discussion. Dr. Raman, you had earlier in our discussion said that you would prefer a presentation in Hindi. Is that still so, or is this audience good enough with English, and should I just continue with that?
As you want, ma'am. There is no problem, ma'am. We can be in Hindi or English or bilingual as you want. No problem.
So maybe I mix it, but then let's continue with what as it has been going.
Yeah, no problem. No problem at all.
Okay. Okay. So thank you. I think Syeda gave us a background and the context in which this book came about. It was to have been published in 2019-20, and therefore it started with problems that already existed pre-COVID. But it seems that COVID has brought the issue much more to the forefront and into public discourse. The kind of problems that everybody recognizes are about how the public system does not provide health care adequately in terms of coverage and suffers from shortages in quality. At the same time, the private sector, which has expanded and reached many corners as well, is too expensive for most Indians and is not considered trustworthy enough. So where does the healthcare come from for the majority of Indians? Is an issue which people are dealing with, and yet there doesn't seem to be enough public discussion on it, and especially not from a systems perspective. It's been largely on when an incident happens, the doctor gets the blame, and you catch the health worker and the doctors at that particular event, and the systemic issues don't seem to get addressed. There is a lot of literature on the problems of healthcare services, and also a lot of diagnoses and the history of how it has evolved and all of that. But we find little today in terms of solutions from a systemic perspective. The whole debate largely seems to focus on the public versus private sector, and which should be the one which is seen as the source of treatment for most Indians, and how should they be financed. So the debate has become public, private, and social insurance versus a free healthcare provisioning. While these are all very important dimensions of the health system, when we looked at these issues, we felt that they were arising not only from these two grids, but there seems to be a problem with the design of the system itself. And are there ways in which we can diagnose what those problems are, and what are the solutions that we already can think of? That's the context in which this volume was conceived of. And the exploration that went behind, as Syeda said, there was several discussions with expert groups and consultations on various themes, including on health. And it was clearly realized that while there is a lot of diagnosis of and analysis of the problems, the solutions outside this particular framing of doctors, hospitals, public versus private, needs to be taken up. And therefore, from that angle, also a reconsideration of the design of health services themselves, and bringing that into the public domain, into public discussion. Because the second part of what we realized was that one needs to bring in much more the people's perspective, and not only the institutional framing that seems to be what guides the public discussion, as well as the policy formulation that is happening. For example, what seems to be lost is the fact that in our environment today, we are going on adding more and more poisonous material of various kinds, and there is very little which is actually coming into that from a health policy angle. And how do we handle that? People have handed over their understanding of their bodies and how to deal with the problems that they face over to doctors, and the dependence on doctors has increased, while the trustworthiness of doctors has become more suspect in the popular mind. So how does one, these are what creates the great complexities within the health system, And of course, the questions of public, private, and financing are extremely critical. But the analyses that are already existing show us that there is an entire politics of knowledge that went behind this designing and created the gaps and inequalities in access that exist today. And therefore, unless we go into those and handle those, our solutions will never be adequate. We'll be tinkering within that same system. This book, however, does not get into that analysis. What it does do is attempting to look at solutions that exist. And because we found there were a large number of solutions from even the 40s when there was discussion on it, and then certainly in the 70s when the Alma Ata came and the whole primary healthcare approach became a global approach. And then through the 80s and 90s in India, we've had several civil society experiments as well as different state governments and the central government experimenting with different models, not only the doctor and hospital centered 19th and 20th century Euro-American model, but our large system design still remains within that confines. Just to repeat that, the 19th and 20th century Euro-American doctor and hospital-centered model gives us still the imagination of what a healthcare system should be and should ideally be, and this becomes central, and all other things are tailored around this. Now, this is what primary healthcare approach of Alma Ata clearly warned against and gave us a pathway. And therefore, what we see are really two parallel pathways that continue to exist through. One, which is democratic, cost-effective, and people empowering. And another, which is not cost-effective, which is much more expensive, less expensive, less effective very often because it creates more doctor-created illness, what is called iatrogenesis, and not empowering but disempowering of people because it creates dependence on the doctor in hospital. And thereby also creates an ademocratic system where regulation becomes less possible because the hegemony and the power of knowledge lies with the doctor, and therefore there is no questioning of what they dictate and how the system evolves with them. Therefore, what this book does is attempts to bring together examples of experiments that have actually worked on the ground and put them together, which looks at different dimensions of this very complex, what we call together as the health system. From the social determinants of health and addressing them to primary healthcare to the secondary and tertiary hospitals, and the primary including from home remedies to community level workers to traditional medicine and to the modern primary healthcare system. All of this so different examples that have worked at different levels within this system have been brought into the book. And our attempt was that if one looks at them together and pulls the thread through, then it provides an example or a different imagination from the existing doctor hospital centered and maybe insurance centered system to something which becomes much more democratic and people empowering. Since it is more cost effective and empowering, it brings in a whole direction of health systems development, which would give us a different imagination and allow a future where more sustainable and empowering health systems could be developed if we take this trajectory. So the 13 articles that are in the volume, the first 6 give you the background context of the approaches that need to be followed and the mindset going back to Bhore Committee and the Alma Ata in terms of primary health care and people-centeredness becoming the model rather than doctor and hospital-centeredness. But it adds on something which has been another parallel silo, that of traditional medicine. While traditional medicine, and when I say traditional medicine, includes homeopathy and Ayurveda, Unani, and so on, which is part of the Ayush acronym. And along with that, the local health traditions that people have practiced, that folk healers have practiced, and the dadi nani kind of nuske. And all of this together, these have not just been sitting static or relying on ancient time texts. They have all been evolving, innovating, changing with the times and the needs as a separate silo. And the doctor hospital goes on as a separate silo, and primary healthcare experiments as a third silo. The attempt in these 6 uh, articles in the beginning is to see how these 3 can come together. And a very remarkable article by Darshan Shankarji shows us how the science, it's not just about operationally saying, acha, isko, patient ko ye bhi de do aur ye bhi de do, but how the science itself for the 21st century can be an integrative science of the basic principles and strengths of Ayurveda or Unani and Tibetan medicine and so on, and the principles of modern medicine. How can they be brought together? And that is really talking about the frontiers of medical science today, where even medical science is moving to systems biology, where more integrative approaches than the classical body-mind divide that modern medicine was born with is being given up even by modern, but it's still very much in the embryonic stages in modern medicine. So, and he then gives very concrete data and examples of operational experiments on the ground, which actually bring us hope and movement towards this kind of thing. I don't have time to go into others, but I just thought I'd highlight this one. So the attempt really is each article gives you at least one or more than one solution, which is a solution which would change the way we think about healthcare systems and how we can think of designing them with experience on the ground of their working. It's with this that we hope that these will move into the discussion. And the final article takes on the example of a state like Chhattisgarh, which used the freedom that federalism gives states to really innovate their health systems. And being a young state, it had the opportunity to create a new and has really shown some remarkable strides in that direction. So I'll leave it there for now. And later, I hope in the discussion, I really look forward to the discussants and their insights, how they've read the volume and what do they make of it, as well as critical feedback that they may have for us. Thank you, Ramesh.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you. Now, we would start the panel discussion. First of all, we would like to invite Dr. Priyanka Yadav to give her views. Priyanka ji, you're welcome on the board.
Thank you, Dr. Raman, for inviting me as a panelist with such esteemed co-panelists and chairperson here. I also thank both the authors for, giving this present of a very beautiful book, which deals with the healthcare challenges which India faces and also provides solutions to these challenges that India has. So I will begin with addressing what the book has dealt with. Although Ritu Priya ma'am has already beautifully highlighted what the book talks about and what is the agenda of the book and how each article sets the tone. But I would begin by doing so in my review as well. So Rethinking India, Dreams of Healthy India, Democratic Healthcare in Post-COVID Times is a comprehensive book to understand challenges which disables the healthcare system. The book provides solution to these healthcare challenges through which healthcare services can become more democratic and fulfill the needs of the times. The title of the book, Dreams of a Healthy India, is a very interestingly chosen title, as it sets the tone, a narrative about how we still have not achieved what the visions we have with respect to healthcare in the system. The articles in the book have been arranged to set the tone of the book. It begins by addressing the problems of growth in urban areas, the rise of healthcare disadvantage faced by urban poor, and how aging Indian population requires healthcare services suitable for their needs and the problems faced by such population. It locates the determinants of health and proposes to have public policies centered around health or public policy design in every sector to have health needs at the core, as every sphere contributes to healthcare or healthcare service delivery. Talking of policies and programs, one does not need to look for high-tech solutions like AI, digital technology, or other technology-driven change, but simply look back at policies and programs earlier adopted, as the article quotes and takes the example of the use of operation research method in the second plan, which helped to achieve balanced growth. Using these techniques, public healthcare needs can be rebuilt and reconstructed. The articles further address existence of local health tradition and Ayush practices in the country, which have shaped community health, and how these practices have been undervalued in the onset for modernity and adoption of Western science of medicine. Instead, the article put forth a case of fusion of Ayurveda and biology, which is a similar practice as it quotes and has a potential to address healthcare needs. The articles further show through examples of Gadchiroli, Ralegaon Siddhi, Ganiyari, and other states and small example, the potential of tapping local knowledge and training local human resource, which have aided public health by providing community-centric timely healthcare in these areas. Considering the structural functional challenge of healthcare delivery, a rethinking and reconceptualization of the system and planning is required towards a more ecological and social approach. Not only structural change or change at policy level, but it is required to have change at the psychological level to erase the overarching pressure created by a colonial mindset and instead think of local solutions to the macro problem, thereby valuing Indian knowledge system in healthcare delivery. Further, the article makes recommendation for universal health coverage through change in medical education system, nursing education, training, and enhancing medical human resource. It proposes areas which needs targeted focus for approach of healthcare that looks after the cradle to grave approach. In a neoliberal ecosystem where healthcare has become commercialized, the articles through examples studies institutions which deliver quality care in a non-profit manner. Moving ahead, the article calls for redesigning and controlling private healthcare institutions through intense regulation and monitoring. The governance modalities of public health system is addressed to understand challenges caused by governance and administration. Lastly, the book ends with the example of Chhattisgarh, how the state has established an effective public health system, a state which inherited ruins and dilapidated healthcare resource has been able to achieve growth and provide a good public health delivery. The book brings elements like policy planning and design, touches upon elements like policy planning and design, matters of politics of knowledge and healthcare delivery, local tradition and community needs, private healthcare modalities, public health rethinking and redesigning. The book addresses healthcare challenges from local to policy and to vision level, where it asks for change at all these diverse areas to address the complexities of the diverse Indian healthcare system. I would like to add to the variety of solutions reflected by the authors to address the healthcare needs. I believe there is a need to bring back Gandhian code of ethics and morality in every sphere and units attached with the healthcare system, from medical education, tertiary care, to primary and local practices. Impart right ethical and moral conduct has become extremely important in the neoliberal time to address healthcare not only as right, but devotion, duty, responsibility, and to make it more humane. So this is what I had to understand about the book, and this is my review for the book. Thank you so much for inviting me, and also thank you to the authors for such a lovely, I had a delightful time reading this book. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Priyanka, for such a fabulous review of the book. Now, we would like to invite Dr. Chandrakant Lahariya to take on the board. Sir, you are welcome on the board.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this invitation to speak here. We are in July 2025, nearly 2 years ago, just when this book was published. Dr. Ritu Priya one day called me up and said that there was some plan that, okay, have you read this book? Or we have this book is out and we would be happy to send the book. And I told Dr. Ritu Priya at that time that I have already received the book and I have already read the book. And so it's 2 years ago, I read the book and then when I was invited for this one, and then I again went through. But I want to reflect about why did I order the book? There were a couple of reasons. One was more personal, that everything which related to health sector I prefer to read, but that was not the only reason. There were reasons which were Dr. Ritu Priya and Dr. Syeda Hameed. Of course, I know Dr. Ritu Priya and we have interacted in the past and we have been discussing, but I've read the work of Dr. Syeda Hameed and The Beautiful Country, the reflection from other India. That is a really amazing book, and I had read that long ago. And of course, Madam, then you were with the Planning Commission. I had an opportunity and good fortune to listen to you. And also, I've seen, I don't recall exactly where, but you do very good performance of some of the Urdu work. I remember whether it was Jaipur Literature Festival or somewhere I've seen you. It's not about what you write, but your passion to that work. And that was my reason to buy the book and read. So one, I bought the book because it was related to health sector, but I bought the book for editors and authors. But third and key part is this. I think one of the big contribution of this book is that most often books are written, like health books are written by medical fraternity or people who are working in core health sectors. So Dr. Syeda Hameed, you were of course member of then Planning Commission for Health. But as you said correctly, that you bring a perspective which is social, which is philosophical, and which is also health sector related. And that makes a book really standing out in comparison of other books. Now that's the relevance and importance of book, and I believe that this book, in that sense, fulfill many of the expectation a reader would have from a book which is written by which is edited by two eminent experts or individuals, but also which had contribution from some of the India's leading experts. So while a lot has been talked about, discussed about the content of the book, and I would like to just put on the record that this content is contributed by some of the leading experts in public health and the policy making and other things. Now, one of the questions which I often have when a book is written, and I'm sure the editor, you must have heard that for whom this book is, who should be reading this book? And that is one of the question I always have in mind, that if this book is intended to be read by the health sector people, then what is new for them? But then if it is to be read by the policymakers, how do we make sure that it is read by the right people? Because there is a lot of effort which goes into the writing, and a book is not always the right platform to convey to the policymakers or politicians. Do they actually read, or do the decision makers actually read? That's a philosophical questions we have. Related part in this is that I would say that if I have to recommend to policymakers or the individuals who decide the policy in this country, I would say that this book definitely stands out in that context, that it provides a fresh perspective on those aspects. Now, coming to the third part of my intervention in this, I personally think that, and I have worked in health systems and other areas, I personally think that there is a very rich content, and Dr. Ritu Priya also highlighted that initial 6th chapter highlight the problem statement, or in a sense like background of this thing. And there are certain chapters which definitely have actionable recommendations. And of course, the content is very wide ranging, start from the traditional medicine or integrative medicine to mental health, public-private partnership. But that's where I would like to reflect and that, okay, so much of the content of the book is on a governance of health system. It is a good critique of what has not happened, but at the same time, there are certain chapters which reflect about the past and a lot of discussion about what has happened since the Bohr committee. But what if our intention, our target reader, who are the young policymakers or the young reader beyond health sector, of course, for them, some of the content and historical information is useful, and that perspective is useful. And I would say that two of the very good chapters are written by the editors of this book. And I'm not saying this because editors are here, because those chapters are very well written and they are really good one. And but what I think that this book had a scope for another second part. The book talks about, of course, in a way, about primary healthcare models in the different parts of the country. It talks about the governance part. But what it does not talks about, in my opinion, that how medicines and diagnostics can can be further scaled up. And I'm sure there would be reason which editor did not select this one, or it can be integrated into service delivery part. But I think if we are talking about dreams of a healthy India, democratic healthcare in post-COVID world, and then there is a good reflection about health systems. It is the book covers three component: governance, a part of service delivery of primary healthcare, and some of the private like governance part, like even the private sector is governance part. But it is relatively thin on human resources. It's relatively it has a scope, and rather that's why I'm saying there is always possibility of second part in the terms of medicines and diagnostics information system. And we would be better off if there are more actionable points. I know a book is not about a policy recommendation document. Book is about a more critical reflections. But even those critical reflections, I think they are like some of the critical reflections are related to National Health Mission and some of the past. If this, like I was thinking that this has already been said, that this book was written in 2019, supposed to be published in 2019. I was also reflecting about if this book relevant, what if this book is written in 2025? Does it stand on those aspects? It does to the large extent, but I would have been more like it would have been a better reading if it was like last decade's key development was also critically reflected and some of the actionable solutions. But to summarize and to conclude this thing, I think it's a very good content and rich book, which provide a very broader perspective, including from beyond medical sector, health sector, as a societal perspective. But it has a scope for a second edition, which will have other components of health system and a holistic view of the health system. I'll stop here and hand over to the moderator.
Thank you very much, sir, for such a holistic analysis of the book. Now we'd invite our another distinguished panelist, Amarjeet sir, Amarjeet Sinha sir. Sir, you're welcome on the board.
आदरणीय रत्नेश्वर जी, आदरणीय सैदा जी, डॉक्टर ऋतु, प्रिय, चंद्रकांत जी, प्रियंका जी, डॉक्टर रमन और सभी अन्य साथी जो इस वेबिनार में साथ हैं। सबसे पहले जब ऋतु जी का फोन आया कि ऐसा पैनल डिस्कशन होना है, तो सोचने की आवश्यकता नहीं थी, क्योंकि किताब मैंने पढ़ा था पहले और ये अच्छा अवसर था जब एक पैनल डिस्कशन में आना था फिर से, तो पुनः मैंने पढ़ा है इसको। और सैदा जी और ऋतु जी को बहुत बहुत साधुवाद। यह पुस्तक महत्वपूर्ण है, महत्वपूर्ण कई कारणों से। आपने इसे स्वस्थ भारत के स्वप्न कहा है। हमारा ये मानना होगा कि स्वप्न को यथार्थ में कैसे परिवर्तित किया जाए, इसकी भी कई कहानियां इसमें हैं। और निश्चित रूप से इस समृद्धता की या इस चुनौती की सामना हम कैसे करें, इसके बारे में बहुत सारी बातें इस पुस्तक के माध्यम से सामने आता है। एक महत्वपूर्ण मुद्दा है, जैसा कि पुस्तक के शीर्ष में ही है, कि लोकतांत्रिक स्वास्थ्य व्यवस्था अपने आप में एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण मुद्दा है, क्योंकि कहीं ना कहीं हम स्वास्थ्य के क्षेत्र को अलग अलग नजरियों से देखते हैं और कई बार लोक भागीदारी या जो गैर सरकारी संगठन और उनकी भूमिका, उसको हम भूल बैठते हैं। कहीं ना कहीं मार्केट, स्टेट और सिटीजन के बीच के रिलेशनशिप को जब हम तलाशते हैं तो कई ऐसे महत्वपूर्ण बिंदु हैं जो प्लूरलिस्ट ट्रेडिशंस की बात आई, जिसकी चर्चा ऋतु जी के पेपर में भी है, या जो हेल्थ में कवरेज की बात आई, जब चंद्रकांत जी बता रहे थे कि कैसे उन्हें खुशी होती है यदि कुछ और विषय इसमें कवर होता, तो मुझे डॉक्टर श्रीनाथ रेड्डी के पेपर का उल्लेख मेरे मन में आ रहा था, जिसमें उन्होंने आर्ग्यू किया है, और शायद ये बात सही है बिल्कुल, कि देश के किसी भी मंत्रिमंडल में लगभग सभी मंत्री स्वास्थ्य मंत्री होते हैं, क्योंकि स्वास्थ्य का क्षेत्र इतना अपार है, इतना इसको संपूर्णता में एक वॉल्यूम में तराशना कई बार कठिन हो जाता है। लेकिन जिन आवश्यक मुद्दों को यह वॉल्यूम विशेष रूप से चिन्हित करता है, और विशेष करके पोस्ट कोविड के समय में कई नीतिगत विषय, यह दुर्भाग्य है कि कई नीतिगत विषय जो होते हैं, उन नीतिगत विषय पर समय समय पर हमें दोहराने की जरूरत पड़ती है। और यह नीतिगत विषय हम स्वास्थ्य के क्षेत्र में पब्लिक सिस्टम्स की चर्चा क्यों करते हैं। ये एक ऐसा विषय है जिसपे कई अर्थशास्त्रियों ने कई वर्षों से, कई दशकों से विचार किया है। और केनेथ एरो की जो सोच थी, जो इंफॉर्मेशन एसिमेट्री की बात उन्होंने कही थी, अगर चंद्रकांत जी डॉक्टर हैं, मैं मरीज हूं, वो मुझसे 5 रुपए लेंगे या 5 लाख लेंगे, वो जानते हैं, मैं नहीं जानता। जहां इंफॉर्मेशन एसिमेट्री होता है वहां मार्केट फेलियर होना ही होना है। और यदि मार्केट फेलियर होना है तो इसी कारण से पब्लिक सिस्टम्स की जरूरत पड़ती है, ऑल्सो एज अ काउंटरवेलिंग प्रेजेंस टू एंश्योर कॉस्ट एंड क्वालिटी ऑफ केयर इन द प्राइवेट सेक्टर एज वेल। ये बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है। जब तमिलनाडु या केरल को हम देखते हैं, which have done well, but where again, and these are issues which I have dealt with in this book, कि दोनों ही राज्यों में who have been doing very well on health parameters, जब हम उनकी हेल्थ सिस्टम्स को देखते हैं, वहां भी प्राइवेट सेक्टर 35-40% है, 50% करीब है तमिलनाडु में। लेकिन एक काउंटरवेलिंग प्रेजेंस ऑफ अ फंक्शनल पब्लिक सिस्टम के कारण प्राइवेट सेक्टर का परफॉर्मेंस भी बेहतर होता है कॉस्ट एंड केयर के संपर्क में। क्योंकि जब तक ये फंक्शनल पब्लिक सिस्टम नहीं होता है, तब तक ये मनमानी वाली स्थिति हो जाती है। हम बिल्कुल इनएडिक्वेट फैसिलिटी में सर्जरीज करेंगे और आई विल गेट अवे विथ इट, अगर वो कोई ऐसा क्षेत्र हो जहां की ऑल्टरनेटिव पब्लिक सिस्टम्स फंक्शनली ना हो। तो उस ख्याल से जो पब्लिक सिस्टम्स की चर्चा इस किताब के कई लेखों में है, वो अत्यंत महत्वपूर्ण है और इसे दोहराते रहना बहुत जरूरी है। क्योंकि हिंदुस्तान का जब मैं लंबा अगर दशकों के विकास के नजरियों को देखता हूं, तो 1991 के इकोनॉमिक रिफॉर्म्स के बाद से आज तक 91 से 2025 के बीच का लगभग 6.5-7% वार्षिक ग्रोथ, इकोनॉमिक परफॉर्मेंस, इकोनॉमिक प्रोग्रेस की जो बात होती है, और इसमें जो प्राइवेटाइजेशन, रोल ऑफ ओपनिंग अप ऑफ मार्केट्स, डीरेगुलेशन, इकोनॉमिक रिफॉर्म्स के तौर पे दे हैव प्लेड अ रोल अक्रॉस गवर्नमेंट्स। बट उसके साथ साथ यह सोच कि while that may well work for the economic activity in any society, But when it comes to sectors like public goods, like health, like education, you need good, credible public systems. कोविड के बाद से पूरे विश्व में इस विषय की समझदारी बेहतर हुई है, और हमारे देश में भी अगर ये पब्लिक सिस्टम के स्ट्रेंथनिंग पर राष्ट्रीय ग्रामीण स्वास्थ्य मिशन में फोकस नहीं होता, तो ग्रामीण क्षेत्रों में इतनी सरलता से हम न तो टीकाकरण कर पाते, न ही कुछ अन्य व्यवस्था स्थापित कर पाते। क्लियरली ह्यूमन रिसोर्सेस की बात जो चंद्रकांत जी ने कही, स्वास्थ्य के क्षेत्र में और इस संदर्भ में हम जिस किसी फ्रेमवर्क से हेल्थ को समझने की कोशिश करें, ह्यूमन रिसोर्सेज एक बहुत ही क्रिटिकल इशू है, और निश्चित रूप से पब्लिक सिस्टम्स को बिल्ड करने में, विशेष रूप से वैसे तो कई इश्यूज इसमें आ चुके हैं और कई ऐसे इश्यूज आए हैं जो कई बार इनकी चर्चा उतनी नहीं होती है। सईदा जी का जो लेख है, गैर सरकारी संगठनों के कई अभिनव प्रयोग जो हुए हैं, सब में एक संवाद है, और संवाद लोक भागीदारी की है। संवाद में स्थानीय मानव संसाधन का है कि एक लोकल कुछ पढ़ी लिखी महिला जामखेड़ में हो, रालेगा, हर जिस जगह पे आप देखें, जो भी प्रयोग हुए, गनियारी में हो, लगभग सब जगह वो कम्युनिटी वर्कर, और कम्युनिटी वर्कर को इतना उसकी क्षमता वर्धन कि वो बहुत कुछ ऐसा काम कर सके और कनेक्ट कर सके हाउस होल्ड्स को हेल्थ सिस्टम से। एक बहुत बड़ी चुनौती, और जिसकी चर्चा इसमें भी है, जो जीपी सिस्टम की चर्चा 2-3 चैप्टर्स में आई है, कि जीपी व्यवस्था की तरह अगर हर हाउस होल्ड को ये मालूम हो कि स्वास्थ्य की सुविधा उन्हें किसके माध्यम से मिलेगी, कहां पर मिलेगी, और किसके पास जाना है यदि कोई भी ऐसी आवश्यकता होती। कनेक्टिंग हाउस होल्ड्स टू हेल्थ फैसिलिटीज अपने आप में ऑन द सप्लाईज डिमांड साइड ये बहुत महत्वपूर्ण मुद्दा है, जिसकी चर्चा 2-3 पेपर्स में इसमें आया है, और मेरे ख्याल से उस पर चर्चा की आवश्यकता थी। दूसरा जो बहुत महत्वपूर्ण मुद्दा, और जिस पर ऋतु जी कई वर्षों से लिखती रही हैं, जो प्लूरलिस्ट ट्रेडिशंस की, हम कई बार मेडिकलाइज्ड सिस्टम ऑफ हेल्थ केयर को ही पूरी तरह से आत्मसात करते हैं। जहां हम स्वास्थ्य की बात करते हैं, वहां हम मेडिकलाइज्ड केयर ही सोचते हैं, और सो भी बिल्कुल एक ही व्यवस्था से। वास्तविकता जो इंटरफेस लोगों का है, वो इंटरफेस दूसरे प्रकार का है। वो इंटरफेस ऐसा है जिसमें कि सभी तरह की व्यवस्थाएं उनकी भूमिका है, चाहे वो वेरियस टाइप्स एंड सिस्टम्स ऑफ मेडिसिन, चाहे वेरियस वेज ऑफ हैंडलिंग अ सिचुएशन, वेरियस फॉर्म्स इन विच द कम्युनिटीज कनेक्ट विद द हेल्थ फैसिलिटीज एंड सिस्टम्स। तो इस डाइवर्सिटी और इस प्लुरैलिटी को मेंटेन करते हुए हम कैसे लोक अधिकार, शिक्षा के अधिकार, स्वास्थ्य के अधिकार को पूरी तरह से उन घरों तक पहुंचा सकें जिन्हें इसकी सर्वाधिक आवश्यकता है। इसी क्रम में अभय शुक्ला जी का जो पेपर है, वो भी एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण पेपर है, क्योंकि हिंदुस्तान में तो ऑलरेडी हमारा हेल्थ सेक्टर बहुत ज्यादा प्राइवेटाइज्ड है। उन्होंने रेगुलेशन की बात कही है, उन्होंने कई ऐसे मुद्दों की चर्चा की है कि कहीं ना कहीं हम आम जन को कैसे जोड़े, अपने आप एक बहुत बड़ी चुनौती है। सेकेंडरी और टर्शरी केयर में विभिन्न सरकारों ने कभी राष्ट्रीय स्वास्थ्य बीमा योजना के नाम पर, कभी प्रधानमंत्री जन आरोग्य योजना के नाम पर यह प्रयास किया है कि कम से कम सेकेंडरी और टर्शरी केयर के क्षेत्र में क्या ऐसी व्यवस्था कैशलेस की हो सकती है कि कोई गरीब व्यक्ति को स्वास्थ्य सुविधाएं निःशुल्क उपलब्ध हो सके सेकेंडरी टर्शरी केयर के। कई चुनौतियां इसमें रही हैं, और निश्चित रूप से ये ऐसी चुनौतियां हैं जिसका समाधान लोक भागीदारी और गैर सरकारी संगठनों की भागीदारी में है। उस विषय पर भी 2-3 लेखों में जन लोक भागीदारी स्वास्थ्य क्षेत्र में कैसे हो, थोड़ी चर्चा सुंदर रमन जी के पेपर में है, अभय शुक्ल जी के पेपर में है, और पवित्र मोहन ने जो चर्चा की है गनियारी का उदाहरण देकर के, काफी प्रोसेसेस, प्रक्रियाओं का भी उल्लेख किया है उन्होंने। प्रक्रियाओं को भी समझना उतना ही महत्वपूर्ण है, क्योंकि हम जब तक प्रक्रियाओं पर अगर फोकस नहीं करते हैं तब तक जिस संवाद को हम पहुंचाना चाहते हैं, कई बार लगता है कि हम तो केवल एक आदर्श की बात करना है। आदर्श को यथार्थ में परिवर्तित करने के लिए प्रक्रियाओं को समझना बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है, क्योंकि ये छोटी छोटी जो माइक्रो एलिमेंट्स हैं एक पब्लिक सिस्टम को बनाने का, हेल्थ केयर का, ये माइक्रो एलिमेंट्स अत्यंत महत्वपूर्ण है। क्षमता वर्धन स्वतः नहीं होता है, और सुंदर रमन जी के पेपर में इसका काफी उल्लेख है। छत्तीसगढ़ के पेपर में भी, सिंहदेव जी के पेपर में भी एक हेल्थ सिस्टम को रिक्राफ्ट करना कैसे किया जा सकता है, किस प्रकार की भूमिका। और अगेन छत्तीसगढ़ में भी ये उदाहरण महत्वपूर्ण इसलिए है कि अक्रॉस गवर्नमेंट्स, कोई भी सरकार हो, एक देयर इज अ कॉमन अंडरस्टैंडिंग जो कि काम करता रहा बिटवीन गवर्नमेंट्स, चाहे वो जो भी मितानिन कार्यक्रम रहा हो या अन्य कुछ ऐसे गतिविधियां रही हो, यह सोच के साथ कि अंततः अगर समुदाय के स्तर पर अगर हम कोई ऐसे सामुदायिक कार्यकर्ता या साधन व्यक्ति को तैयार नहीं करें जो घरों को सुविधाओं से जोड़ सके, तो केवल सप्लाई साइड की ओर फोकस करने से हमारा काम नहीं होगा। और शायद आशा वर्कर की जो भूमिका थी इस पुस्तक में, मुझे लगा कि अगर आशा वर्कर पे भी एक होता अगर आर्टिकल, महत्वपूर्ण होता, क्योंकि अपने आप में वो एक्रीडेटेड सोशल हेल्थ एक्टिविस्ट की जो भूमिका जो सोची गई थी, और अगर हम आज उससे रिफ्लेक्ट करें उस पर, बल्कि एक बहुत शीघ्र ऋतु जी हम लोग सभी इन्वॉल्व हैं एक माइक्रो स्टडीज इन ह्यूमन डेवलपमेंट तैयार करने में। 21 दिसंबर को हम लोग उनको रिलीज कर रहे हैं, 6 वॉल्यूम्स। हेल्थ वाले वॉल्यूम पे रजनी और उनकी साथियों ने एक बहुत अच्छा एक रिफ्लेक्शन का पेपर बनाया है ऑन दी आशा वर्कर। तो मैं तो सभी वॉल्यूम्स को एक साथ देखने की जरूरत है। एक और पब्लिक हेल्थ फॉर ऑल पर वॉल्यूम इंडिया इंटरनेशनल सेंटर के एक वार्षिक में निकला, जिसे श्रीनाथ रेड्डी जी ने, अमिता गोयल ने एडिट किया था। यह वॉल्यूम और जो वॉल्यूम जिस पर हम लोग सभी काम कर रहे हैं, तो हमें लगता है कि एक मिल करके अपने आप में एक संपूर्णता में उसे देखने की जरूरत है। और एक अंतिम विषय जो बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है, मानसिक स्वास्थ्य पर चैप्टर जो विक्रम पटेल जी ने लिखा है, इस पर और ज्यादा चर्चा होनी चाहिए। चर्चा तो पहले भी होनी चाहिए थी, और कोविड के बाद से तो और ज्यादा होनी चाहिए। अपने आप में हमें मानसिक स्वास्थ्य की मुद्दों को लोक भागीदारी, हाउस होल्ड, कम्युनिटी के स्तर पर क्या संभव है, इस दृष्टिकोण से देखने की आवश्यकता है। क्योंकि कहीं ना कहीं समाज में आज भी मानस कुछ ऐसा है कि मानसिक समस्याओं का आप उल्लेख करें तो लोगों के मन में एक बिल्कुल दूसरी सोच होती है। ओ, इसे कोई मेंटल प्रॉब्लम है तो इसे मतलब कम्युनिटी के स्तर पे, हाउस होल्ड के स्तर पर न सोच करके बिल्कुल आइसोलेशन वाले मुद्दे में हम सोचने लगते हैं। ये एक बहुत ही घातक मुद्दा है। घातक इसलिए है क्योंकि कई लोग हैं, जैसे कि अब अध्ययन से पता चल रहा है और कोविड के बाद से तो और ज्यादा, जिन्हें एक लोकतांत्रिक स्वास्थ्य व्यवस्था जिसमें समुदाय की भूमिका, गैर सरकारी संगठनों की भूमिका और एक ऐसे कम्युनिटी वर्कर की जो हाउस होल्ड को हेल्थ फैसिलिटी से जोड़ सके, उसकी भूमिका अत्यंत महत्वपूर्ण है। इन मुद्दों की ओर इस वॉल्यूम में कई चैप्टर्स हैं जो इस पूरे मुद्दे से हमें जोड़ते हैं। पवित्र मोहन जी के चैप्टर में, और मैं उल्लेख करना चाहूंगा, पवित्र मोहन जी ने अभी हाल में ही जिस वॉल्यूम की मैं चर्चा कर रहा था, उसमें उन्होंने एक लेख कंट्रीब्यूट किया है जो इससे इस वॉल्यूम के लिए भी बहुत रेलिवेंट है, माइग्रेशन को लेकर के। माइग्रेशन तो एक सच्चाई है कि माइग्रेशन तो होगा। लोग अपने गांव से उठ करके शहरों में काम की तलाश में, बेहतर आजीविका की तलाश में आएंगे, लेकिन उनका आना दर्द मुक्त हो, उनका आना समस्या मुक्त हो, उसमें स्वास्थ्य की एक बहुत बड़ी भूमिका है। पवित्र मोहन जी ने माइग्रेशन और हेल्थ सर्विसेज फॉर द पुअर पर एक फील्ड बेस्ड अनुभव के आधार पर लिखा है, जो मेरे ख्याल से बहुत ही अत्यंत महत्वपूर्ण है हमारे लिए। और अंत में इस पूरे वॉल्यूम में एक जो मुद्दा जो निरंतर बार बार आता है, वह मुद्दा आखिरी मील का है। लोक नीति की असली चुनौती आखिरी मील की है। एट द कटिंग एज लेवल, जहां पर एक हाउस होल्ड की आवश्यकताओं को हम पूरा करने की कोशिश करते हैं एक सिस्टम के माध्यम से, सिस्टम अपने आप में बहुत बड़ा है, और जब कभी एक गरीब परिवार का इंटरैक्शन एक लार्ज सिस्टम से होता है, इट इज अ वेरी अनइक्वल रिलेशनशिप। उस रिलेशनशिप की इनइक्वालिटी को दूर करने का तरीका है कम्युनिटी बेस्ड ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस which provide that support for households to have the confidence to seek health services. जैसा कि एनएसएस और बाकी स्टडीज में भी आता है, ऐसी अब एक राज्य केरल है जहां छोटी सी भी कोई माइनर एलिमेंट हो वो भी रिपोर्ट होता है। जैसे कि मॉर्बिडिटी की स्टडीज में आता है, यह आश्चर्यजनक तथ्य कि केरल में मॉर्बिडिटी बिहार से ज्यादा है। वास्तविकता वो नहीं है, लेकिन परसेप्शन की जो बात है, केरल में अगर सर्दी बुखार भी हो तो मॉर्बिडिटी में वो आ जाता है। बिहार में अगर गैंग्रीन भी पैर में है फिर भी काम चल रहा है। तो कहीं ना कहीं इन विषयों पर हमें चर्चा करने की आवश्यकता है कि एक अनइक्वल सिस्टम से इंटरफेस जब कभी किसी गरीब परिवार का होता है तो अनइक्वल होता है। अगर अनइक्वल होता है तो उसे हम इक्वल कैसे बनाएं? बिना सिविल सोसाइटी की भागीदारी के, बिना लोक भागीदारी के, बिना लोकल गवर्नमेंट्स के इन्वॉल्वमेंट के, तो कई लोकल इंस्टीट्यूशंस की चर्चा श्रीनाथ के पेपर्स में चैप्टर में थोड़ी इसकी चर्चा है, अन्य चैप्टर्स में भी है। तो ये आखिरी मील का मुद्दा जो है, मैं आखिरी मील की चर्चा इसलिए भी कर रहा हूं कि अभी 2023 में हमने एक पुस्तक प्रकाशित किया था, द लास्ट माइल टर्निंग पब्लिक पॉलिसी अपसाइड डाउन, और जिसकी हिंदी संस्करण को भी आखिरी मील लोक नीति की असली चुनौती। मैं इसकी चर्चा इसलिए कर रहा हूं कि एक पब्लिक सर्वेंट होने के नाते और पब्लिक पॉलिसी के निर्माण से जुड़े होने के कारण ग्रामीण विकास के क्षेत्र में, स्वास्थ्य में या शिक्षा में, हमने ये पाया है अपनी कमियों से ही कि कई बार हमारे प्रयासों में वह अपेक्षाकृत सफलता नहीं मिलने का कारण आखिरी मील जो लोक नीति की असली चुनौती है, उस पर पूरी गहराई से प्लानिंग के स्टेज पर अगर हम ध्यान न दें, तब आखिरी मील की चुनौतियां चुनौती रह जाती है। तो इस वॉल्यूम से भी ऐसे कई उदाहरण इसमें हैं जिसमें प्रक्रियाओं का उल्लेख है, लोकल लेवल प्रैक्टिसेस का उल्लेख है, सिस्टम्स के स्ट्रेंथनिंग का उल्लेख है। तो अपने आप में अत्यंत ही महत्वपूर्ण वॉल्यूम है। सैदा जी ने एंड ऋतु जी ने जिन पेपर्स को इसमें संजोया है, सभी पेपर्स में कई ऐसे सोच हैं जिन्हें हमें और सार्वजनिक रूप पर जिस पर बहस होनी चाहिए। बहस की बात मैंने इसलिए कही कि केनेथ हैरो की बात बार बार होते हुए भी अशोका मोदी जी ने अभी जो प्रिंसटन यूनिवर्सिटी में प्रोफेसर हैं, उनकी किताब इंडिया इज ब्रोकन एंड हार्ड टू फिक्स, मुख्य जो क्रिटिक उनका है कि इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ तो 6.5-7% 91 के बाद से हो रहा है। सोशल डेवलपमेंट में भी 2004-5 से कई चीजें जब से शुरू चल रही हैं, नेशनल फूड सिक्योरिटी एक्ट, नेशनल रूरल एम्प्लॉयमेंट गारंटी एक्ट, अन्य सभी हाउसिंग के प्रोग्राम्स, बाकी प्रोग्राम्स, कुछ तो चेंजेस हैं, लेकिन उनका जो लार्जर क्वेश्चन विच ही पोजेस, हिंदुस्तान में पब्लिक गुड्स के सेक्टर में हमारी सफलताएं बहुत ही सीमित हैं। प्राथमिक शिक्षा, प्राथमिक स्वास्थ्य, पोषण, क्लीन एनवायरनमेंट, वेल फैसिलिटेटेड सिटीज जहां पे वर्किंग क्लास की व्यवस्थाएं अच्छी हों, ऑल दीज हाई AQI से हम ग्रीन डेवलपमेंट, कई मुद्दे हैं जिनको हम पब्लिक गुड्स की श्रेणी में रखते हैं। उन क्षेत्रों में as a country, while we have done very well on rates of economic progress, we have done a little better on social development 2004-5 onwards continuously, but our challenges in crafting credible public systems in sectors of public goods, and health is one of the largest one here along with education, since I am currently working on a public report on secondary education with a team, I realize the challenges can be quite similar. We are doing a study to begin with in the National Capital Region, but we will be covering about 10 or 12 states, doing household surveys, doing facility school surveys and so on. But of the 14 to 21, हम यह समझना चाह रहे हैं कि 14 से 21 वर्ष के ह्यूमन कैपिटल की आवश्यकताएं यूथ की जो है, उनकी एस्पिरेशंस क्या है और व्हाट इज इट दैट द सिस्टम इज ऑफरिंग देम. और अब तक जो भी हमें मिले हैं इनसाइट्स, आई कैन ओनली से इट रिफ्लेक्ट्स द नीड फॉर अ डिसेंट्रलाइज्ड local government and community-led approach. One last point I wish to make कि women-led development की बात, और खास करके जब बिहार में यह आयोजित हो रहा है, इस बात को मैं रखना चाहूंगा. इस वॉल्यूम में I would have loved to see a little more on local governments and women collectives and their role. जीविका की मूवमेंट जो बिहार में है, सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप्स महिलाओं का, रूरल लाइवलीहुड मिशन के अंतर्गत गांव-गांव में जीविका की दीदी है. बिहार के आप किसी भी गांव में जाए, अगर कोई व्यवस्था काम नहीं करता है, तब लोगों का पहला रिस्पांस होता है कि जीविका दीदी को दे दीजिए, ठीक हो जाएगा. राशन की दुकान नहीं चल रही है, ठीक, पूछिए अगर वहां स्थानीय लोगों से, जीविका दीदी को आप इसमें इन्वॉल्व कर लेंगे तो ठीक हो जाएगा. स्वास्थ्य भी एक ऐसा क्षेत्र है जिसे जीविका दीदियों की जरूरत है. पिछले NFHS 4 और 5 के बीच में अगर आप देखेंगे 2015-16 से 2019-21 के बीच में बिहार में न्यूट्रिशन में, स्टंटिंग में बहुत ज्यादा चेंज, सिक्किम के 8 पॉइंट का फर्क आया था, 8 परसेंटेज पॉइंट्स का, लेकिन बिहार में भी करीब 5 परसेंटेज पॉइंट्स का फर्क आया था. और अगर जब हम लोगों ने डिटेल में समझने की कोशिश की, तो जीविका दीदियों द्वारा जो कार्य डाइटरी डाइवर्सिटी के लिए कम्युनिटी के साथ मिलके जो काम कर रही थी, it is formal research studies have been conducted which establish how through a community approach involving the women's collectives, the dietary diversity among children and women improved as a consequence of that. तो कहीं ना कहीं महिलाओं का संगठन, लोकल गवर्नमेंट्स की भूमिका, अगर हम साथ साथ इसको लेकर के चलें तो शायद हमें और बेहतर रिजल्ट मिलेगा. अंत में सभी आयोजकों का बहुत बहुत आभार इस अवसर के लिए, और सैदा जी और ऋतु जी को विशेष रूप से उनका अभिनंदन. आपने बहुत ही उपयोगी वॉल्यूम को तैयार किया है, जिसकी सार्थकता बनी रहेगी, और जिसकी सार्थकता को बनाए रखने में ऐसे लोक चर्चाएं जितनी हो उतना अच्छा है. क्योंकि जैसा मैंने प्रारंभ में ही कहा, सब कुछ समझने के बाद भी कभी कभी हम ये गलती कर बैठते हैं, और सभी सरकारों में यह समस्या है कि हम यह सोचने लगते हैं कि जिस प्रकार से हम 7%, 6.5% ग्रोथ प्राइवेट सेक्टर के थ्रू कर लिया, हेल्थ में भी कर ले. ऐसा होता नहीं. पूरी दुनिया में जो उदाहरण है, पब्लिक सिस्टम्स की आवश्यकता है. वी नीड टू डू मच मोर फॉर क्राफ्टिंग क्रेडिबल पब्लिक सिस्टम्स इफ यू वांट टू फेस द चैलेंजेस, whether of pandemics, whether of any of the other public health challenges that we discussed today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. सर के बहुत ही सारगर्भित और बहुआयामी विश्लेषण के लिए लॉट ऑफ थैंक्स. अब हम लोग पैनल डिस्कशन से आगे बढ़ेंगे. कुछ लेखक जो हमसे जुड़े हुए हैं, जैसे राजवीर जी जिन्होंने कंट्रीब्यूट किया है इस बुक में, if they would like to add upon something, they can take few minutes and they can add upon. The authors who have joined us, they are most welcome to add upon before starting the session, question answer sessions.
I believe you meant Rajiv Dasgupta.
Ji.
Thank you. Am I the only author around? I don't know.
Yes, I think so.
Oh, okay. Then I clearly have an added responsibility to speak for everyone. But first, on a serious note, it's been an absolute honor to be part of this volume. And also, if I'm not wrong, as the authors of the opening chapter, so the openers have an added responsibility. I had Professor Kulkarni, a former professor, a very respected professor of demography, as my senior partner in that opening partnership. What we sought to do in that chapter essentially is to set the horizon, what the population and demographic challenges and features are, and therefore, as the panelists have been discussing, how really does India gear up to a changing population and demographic scenario, of course, intertwined with disease profiles. Of course, it went through very rigorous editorial feedback from Professor Ritu, Priya, Dr. Hameed. We did revise it quite a few times, but overall, it's been a very, very satisfying experience, and we are really privileged to have provided a chapter in the first section that Professor Ritu Priya set out as sort of setting the scene or setting the context of this pretty large volume. On a personal note, talking of population, only yesterday was the World Population Day. 33 years, exactly 33 years ago, almost to the date would be my guess, is when I was interviewed by Dr. Ritu Priya as an MPH student in the selection interviews. And one of the questions, and this is 1992, so please, if you wind back to that context, one of the questions I was asked in my MPH student interview was about population explosion, population bomb, etc. And now we have had this journey when some states are actually expressing concern about the declining population. And of course, it's in several countries of the world, it's become quite a concern and a rage, in fact. So in our lifetimes, we have seen this remarkable transition, and therefore, particularly as in the last presentation, Mr. Sinha laid out, let us have hope for a healthier India in maybe the next few decades to come. Thank you once again. Thank you very much, and thanks to the organizers.
Thank you, Rajiv ji. Now, with the permission of the chair, we would like to open this session for question and answers. If anybody would like to raise any question, or if they would like to comment or give any other views, they are welcome on the board.
May I?
Sir, please.
I have some small queries and more philosophical than concrete. Professor Ritu Priya mentioned about the mind-body duality and philosophical challenge that is emerging from these people's movements. Do you think the epistemic hierarchy that you talk about is being challenged by these movements, or it is a kind of adjustment? The kind of gap that is happening due to neoliberal, intense neoliberal policies. So people's movements are just trying to adjust with that gap. Or you think some serious philosophical challenge that is emerging, which may culminate into a major movement or major challenge to the system itself. A bit of hope that we had after the COVID, a lot of philosophers started arguing that greed is dead. But a couple of years after COVID, it seems, the greed is much more vibrant than it was in the pre-COVID phase. So is it that we are destined to remain in the same kind of frame for another 50 years? Or you think something is simmering in the grassroots, which might gradually being articulated, which can really challenge the system, and some institutional change might happen in the health sector? Yeah, I'm done.
Dr. Raman, would you like to say some more questions, or shall I try and respond?
Yeah, maybe we can try.
Manjaji, very, very relevant question. The people's health movements, as we see the dominant ones, are not taking on the issue of epistemic hierarchy at all. They're looking at still the problem that has arisen since the 90s of the loss of public systems and access to public services, which the majority are facing. So they're still dealing with that issue. The epistemic hierarchy issue is being taken up by those who are trained and or passionate about the other systems of knowledge. And they are, as I was saying earlier, very creative. One section of them, there again, I see two different movements. There's a mainstream movement which is actually moving to some kind of a loss of the holistic nature of those systems and moving closer to reference points that the modern is putting out for them, and falling into the trap of the commercialization of the pharmaceutical industry. So they're moving in that trajectory as the mainstream, while there are other streams which are attempting, and they are the ones more closely located with people's movements or people-centered activity, where they are trying to innovate and draw the strength from the original principles of their knowledge system and make it more suited to present times, not falling into the commercialization or the reductionist framing, but keeping their moorings in the holistic approach. How do they address today's public health issues? Some may be emerging, like COVID. When COVID came, a whole spate of them attempted, whether it was Siddha or Ayurveda or Unani, to respond to COVID. The mainstream, of course, made fun of that, but that's besides the point. They use that opportunity very creatively to really generate data and evidence and solutions that they had to adapt and develop. So, as I see, there are different streams working at absolute cross purposes sometimes, but the hope is that the more pro people ones will come together and coalesce and provide us solutions for the future, which, because they are more cost effective, should be taken up and taken more seriously even by policymakers. But whether that will happen, or the medical industrial complex and its capitalist frame and the commercialization it brings with it, and therefore the power of capital that it carries with it, whether that will carry the day in the future decades, or this pro people stream will, is, I think, open to the politics of the future.
May I just add one small question? Sure. Which political party do you think is sympathetic to the second kind of thing you said, which could be pro-people assertion? Because we find we are in a very peculiar situation. On the one hand, we have commercialized Ayurvedic system like Baba Ramdev, who brought something during COVID. On the other hand, the debate that happened, it was almost like very old debate, 19th century debate between modern and traditional medicine. And even the left, which could have been examined differently, I did not see coming forward to do that. So among the political parties, the party which supports the traditional medicine, that actually empties out the value of the traditional medicine or all such alternative medicines. So how do you think that challenge these people are going to meet?
See, absolutely. I think the ones that are dealing with espousing Indian knowledge systems are taking it into the classical knowledge system frame of the with the ancient texts without looking at people's practice, how people adapt and innovate and use. So it becomes much more, again, part of the more authoritarian framing of that. And,
I call it
they are the ones moving it into the more commercialized frame. So therefore, I don't really see hope in that kind of class. But there is a section among them, just like there is a Swadeshi movement within the Hindutva. So there is some, so even within them, there is a difference, but that cannot be a way of hope there. In the left parties, while there is their whole ideological mooring is with modern medicine, and other forms of medicine and folk practice are all seen as obscurantist and so on, and therefore not to be. But when we'd done a study when I was the National Rural Health Mission to look at the different states and what was built up as healthcare in each state of the Ayush systems and how they were being used, the 3 states which we found, we had not taken up because another study was doing it, Rajasthan or Madhya Pradesh, and they are 2 which have strong, but we did take where we found the maximum number of traditional medicine Ayush institutions on the ground was in Kerala, West Bengal, and Tripura. Now, the only commonality I find between them politically is they were left-oriented at that time. Right. So the only analysis I could make of that, because they were going against their ideological framing, was that they were all had to respond to the people on the ground and the demands of the people on the ground as part of their politics. Therefore, they had to do that. So any party which is really, and therefore this, to me, the answer really comes from what Priyanka said about the Gandhian perspective. Because you neither want that left kind of rejection, nor the kind of espousal that the right is doing, but the Gandhian which starts from people. His experiments, even on health, were with naturopathy and so on, was what could be cheaply available to every Indian, including the poorest. And therefore, how can one work on that? There are inklings of that in the Indian National Congress Cup Planning Committee and the sub-planning committee of the INC itself at the time of independence. It was called the Sokhi Committee, which differed from the Bhore Committee on exactly these grounds. And if we'd followed that, instead of having AIMS as our whole model, what it would have meant is that each village would have had the youth who were trained in health, and therefore everybody got basic minimum health care. And then from them, you moved some of them up to becoming doctors and so on. So instead of that would have been a bottom-up approach to health system development as compared to what we adopted as the Bhore Committee, which was a much more British and USSR kind of model, say, drawing the model. So we have these examples, stated and before us. So the imagination has been there, but we've not picked it up politically. And I'm saying today, I don't know which part. You're absolutely right. I mean, that's a huge challenge to say. And unfortunately, the people's health movements are also not adequately picking it up. So even there, we don't see that hope. So, but there is a stream within the people's health movement, which is. So these are the weaker and more marginal streams, even within the people's health movement, but they are there. And within the Ayush, there is a strong element which is attempting to look at local health traditions and Ayush. So it's from these, but these are weak strands which we hope will coalesce into something.
Thank you, ma'am. If any other question is there, still we can take 1 or 2 more questions. If anybody would like to raise.
If none is there, then I may raise another question. I have many of them we have written down, but let me see if anybody else is interested, then I can.
Let me, before, since you are coming for another question, if I can speak
Please.
a little bit.
Yeah.
I think these questions about which political party or which legislature are more inclined toward health, for me, more important question is that which group of political party or which group of government has done something on health which is more lasting. For example, of course, it's like, for example, National Health Mission or National Rural Health Mission. One of the biggest achievement is that it is something which had been continued for a longer period. But then if we look at what happened in Delhi as a Mohalla clinic, it is now in the mode of a dismantling. So one of the achievement, like irrespective of political party, a government should create something which is really long lasting. So from what we saw from early 1950 till now, the primary healthcare, the system which has been created, NHM's or NHM's biggest achievement is that it is an institutional framework which is being created. Similarly, I personally think that what is Ayushman Bharat program with two pillars is really foundational. But what is wrong with this pillar, and this is like also intention to implementation gap, that while in theory Ayushman Bharat program with two component is really fundamental change in healthcare, which will help in addressing many of the health problems, but on the ground it has not been implemented. So to summarize my broader points, that each of the political party had some intention, but not all of them have followed it through the implementation at the ground, and that is the key challenge. And final part of this intervention is that, like I was recently, like 2 days ago, I was talking to like around 80 legislators and MLAs from 24 Indian states, and they were from different states. One of the group had organized this interaction with the MLA. So across the political party, in fact, when I was moderating that, I was speaking and then interacting with them, there were MLAs who were saying that, oh, let's forget the party line. We need to focus upon these aspects of health. So India had not reached or matured to that stage where we can say that this political party is espousing the cause of health. But definitely there are individuals who are doing, but how vocal or how well argumentative they are, it depends on whether their voice is being heard or not. So it's more of a foundational question. And since I have this speaking opportunity, give me 1 more minute. And another point which I would like to say, that we are in the current system, like still, like even though we criticize what is wrong, but we are still looking from that older prism of primary healthcare or older prism of this health system. And we often talk a lot about people-centric approach, but it is also time that, and Mr. Sinha also reflected about supply side aspect, but then one of the aspect and demand side beyond the community engagement or community participation is looking at the changing health needs of the communities. For example, and I'm just we'll stop with this one. For example, like we talk about primary healthcare or mental health and all of these things. These are important aspects, and the view is either academic or top level. But for within the mental health, I want to flag one issue: the postpartum depression. Postpartum, like very few people would know, and I ask this question often, that what proportion of women suffer from a postpartum depression? The actual number is 15 to 20% of women who deliver suffer from postpartum. With India 2.7 crore pregnancy every year, like around 50 lakh women have a postpartum depression. But this is an issue which is not discussed. This is the health services are not available. So my point here is that in our writing, in our public discourse, while we look at the broader framing of the public health issues, but we also need to look at like verticalized or specific issues. The postpartum depression is also equity issue. It's a last mile issue. It's a issue of those who do not have access to healthcare services. So we need to deconstruct, and some of the writing should also deconstruct, because my one of the personal opinion is that it looks unintelligent in a broader group if we go for a smaller issue here. That's why these issues of women or these issues of underprivileged are not considered. So I stop here. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Manin, sir, you wanted to ask?
Amarjeet ji, do you want to say something?
जैसा कि ऋतु जी और चंद्रकांत जी ने कहा, बिकॉज मुझे ऐसे कई अवसर मिले हैं जिसमें कि सरकार में बदलती रही, लेकिन नीतियों में उतना परिवर्तन नहीं हुआ। मैं उदाहरण देना चाहूँगा, जैसे सर्व शिक्षा अभियान, उस समय सरकार एनडीए की थी, अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी जी की सरकार थी, और डॉक्टर मुरली मनोहर जोशी हमारे मंत्री थे। सर्व शिक्षा अभियान का प्रारंभ उस समय हुआ जब सरकारें बदली तो कई लोगों का ये मानना था कि हो सकता है कि ये डिसकंटिन्यू हो जाएगा, लेकिन ऐसा हुआ नहीं। सर्व शिक्षा अभियान दूसरी सरकार ने भी उसको आगे बढ़ाया। उसी प्रकार से डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह की सरकार में नेशनल रूरल हेल्थ मिशन, जिसमें अर्बन जोड़ने के बाद नेशनल हेल्थ मिशन के नाम से हुआ। सरकारें बदल गई लेकिन उसके नेशनल हेल्थ मिशन पर से वो कंटिन्यू किया। तो लेसन तो यही है कि हर एक राजनीतिक दल और कहीं ना कहीं जो सरकार के पब्लिक सर्वेंट्स हैं उनकी भी एक भूमिका बनती है इस कंटिन्यूटी को उस सोच के साथ कैसे हम बढ़ा पाए, या जो क्रिटिकल इश्यूज हैं जो कि शोध के माध्यम से आता है समय समय पे, जैसे पोस्टपार्टम डिप्रेशन की बात चंद्रकांत जी ने कही, इन विषयों पे सिस्टम रिस्पॉन्सिव कैसे हो और ज्यादा। और इसी क्रम में मैं ये कहना चाहूंगा कि अक्रॉस पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज बहुत सारी चीजों में इस तरह के जो इंटरवेंशंस या रिसोर्सेज, लेकिन जैसा चंद्रकांत जी ने कहा कि अब सोच केवल पॉलिसी अपने आप में पर्याप्त नहीं है, चाहे वो 17 की पॉलिसी है 2002 की पॉलिसी है, पॉलिसी तो केवल इंटेंट है। तो कहीं ना कहीं यह भी महत्वपूर्ण है कि हाउ मच ऑफ रिसोर्सेज डू वी बैक इट विथ। फाइनेंशियल रिसोर्सेज अगर ना हो एडिक्वेटली बैकिंग इट along with governance and institutional reforms, then unfortunately many things that we want to do we cannot do. So ये issues continuously, I think this is something we need to debate, but I'll stop here. Thank you.
I think, can I speak a little bit?
Yeah, please.
This is in response to Professor Thakur's comment, question about which pro party या कौन सी party है जो health के health को लेके enthusiastic है या इस पे काम करे. I think, sir, why are we leaving the question of health post-COVID per se to a party in particular? पहली बात तो हमें इस स्वास्थ्य के इतने इंट्रिंसिक मैटर को किसी भी पर्टिकुलर पार्टी के साथ जोड़ने की जरूरत नहीं है, ना ही गवर्नमेंट. ऑफ कोर्स गवर्नेंस, एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन, पॉलिसी उनकी अपनी जगह है, वी रिक्वायर देम, but the vision of healthcare or the vision of health per se should not be left to any particular party. Even in this book, we have examples written by Syeda mentioning about how local traditions, local, local people, local resources can be channeled or can be empowered to provide good quality healthcare. जिनका लेना देना किसी पार्टी से नहीं है या किसी particular ideology से नहीं है. तो हमें what is required, I think and I believe, is a more village centric or perhaps a ground centric approach for health, and not top down, which Ritu Priya ma'am also points out towards, that we don't need a bottom up, a top down approach, but a more bottom up approach. We need to understand health from the local perspective, from the roots, and also give solutions from the local perspective and the roots, rather than giving top down or a centralized solution to problem in order to have that last mile reach, which Amarjeet sir spoke about. And because in India, the country India is, the local needs are very different and varied. हर चीज को समझना सेंटर का या स्टेट के कुछ लोगों cannot be left with them only. Some of the things can be understood and can be addressed by the local community only. I think we can work from that angle, from the top down, from bottom up, where local resources, local people are channeled, and of course the party in particular and the government can provide governance, administration around those needs and local traditions. So that's what I have to make a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Priyanka ji. Sir, Manin sir, shall we take up the question, or shall we go for chair's address?
Can I just respond to what Chandrakant Lahariya ji and
yeah, ma'am, please.
I'll just take 2 minutes. I think what Chandrakant Lahariya ji said is extremely important, that specific problems, health problems that exist among people and we are not picking them adequately, need to be done. And for that, I think in the articles, when we talk of the knowledge, I think Sundaraman's article and the knowledge system, how much are we using epidemiology and epidemiological data? We are collecting lots of it for actual planning. Are we allowing ourselves to look at that and then plan and create policy? I think that's an important element, and that is related to governance. and how governance deals with evidence and really uses it. On the issue of parties, while there is an issue of continuity and the fact, as Priyanka said, that all parties from independence have taken on a certain view, and then there's been a continuity through. There have been changes which are being continued by both parties. One issue which I think still, to my mind, remains a political issue is centralization versus decentralization. Is the governance system going to be centralized? And that comes from a political, ideological framing. Today, we are seeing more and more of a centralization. Even the Ayushman Bharat has to create an authority to govern it. It will not otherwise function as it's meant to. While if you talk of decentralized, what Priyanka said is a bottom-up approach, you will need, what Amarjeet ji also said about the last mile, will need a decentralized approach which allows people's diversity to get expressed and implemented. And therefore, politically, which parties will go for centralization or decentralization may actually take two different paths. Given the way the health system itself has evolved globally and the whole medical industrial complex, it'll go along with the centralized one, and the decentralized might have the ability to question it and therefore change the structure of the health system. But if we go with the centralized, it will go with that. So just that I think we need to consider when we think of the political frame.
रमन, अगर आप अनुमति दें, एक लाइन केवल बताना चाहूंगा। 2023 में रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया की एक पब्लिकेशन आई, स्टेट ऑफ पंचायती राज इन इंडिया। उसमें उन्होंने राज्यों में जहां जहां विकेंद्रीकरण हुआ है लोकल गवर्नमेंट्स तक, डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन और डेवोल्यूशन हुआ है, उसका उन्होंने पहले इंडेक्स बनाया, और इंडेक्स बनाने के बाद उन्होंने हेल्थ और सैनिटेशन के सेक्टर में राज्यों के परफॉर्मेंस का असेसमेंट किया। क्लियर कट कोरिलेशन, जिन राज्यों में विकेंद्रीकरण डेवोल्यूशन ज्यादा हुआ है उन राज्यों का हेल्थ एंड सैनिटेशन इंडिकेटर्स बेटर है। सो देयर इज गुड एविडेंस टू से व्हाट रितु जी बोल रही हैं, जो कि लोकल गवर्नेंस एंड लोकल गवर्नमेंट्स की भूमिका टू कैप्चर द डाइवर्सिटी ऑफ द नीड्स ऑफ पीपल is most critical, whichever way we look at, and the evidence is very strong on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Now we would invite and request Chair of the day to enlighten us. Sir, you're welcome, sir. Ratnewshwar, sir.
Thank you, Ramanji. I perhaps never felt as embarrassed and as overawed to preside over a book discussion as I feel today. It's not because I could not understand things. I understood things. I even read the book, though somewhat hurriedly. It's also not because the participants in this evening's program were all wonderfully well placed to speak whether in English or in Hindi. But all of these put together certainly overawe me. Let me first very quickly sum up what the participants said. Not actually sum up, but just hint at what I felt the most important point that they tried to make out. Dr. Syeda Hameed tried to introduce to us the series Rethinking India, brought out by Vintage of the Penguin publication. Then Professor Ritu Priya contextualized the book, and told us about how it evolved over the years. Priyanka Yadav ji made a very fervent plea about local knowledge and local resources for health care. She also emphasized about Gandhian code of ethical and moral conduct. Chandrakant Lahariya ji was very correct when he said that the book has not been written by any medical person, but by policymakers and scholars. And that makes the difference. Had the medical persons written it, or had the discussants this evening might have been the medical persons, things might have gone different way. Certainly not the way that it has gone right now. Amarjeet Sinha ji was brilliant in all aspects. He said that the book is significant. He said that स्वस्थ भारत सिर्फ स्वप्न नहीं, वास्तविकता भी होनी चाहिए. He said that लोकतांत्रिक स्वास्थ्य सबका अभीष्ट होना चाहिए. पर एक बहुत बड़ी बात उन्होंने ये कही कि पोस्ट कोविड काल में नीतिगत निर्णय किस तरह से पब्लिक सिस्टम के माध्यम से निर्धारित सार्वजनिक प्रक्रिया के अनुसार होते रहना चाहिए. इस बात को बार बार याद दिलाए जाने की जरूरत है. और भी बहुत सारी बातें मैं सारी बातें नोट भी नहीं कर पा रहा था जिस गति से बातें कही गई. As regards the series Rethinking India, one can gain the idea by the very simple fact that the book has 13 essays over 243 pages, and the essays are devoted to nation and nationalism, democracy, and the jobs related to the national development. But apart from them, there are other essays which are all devoted to each different class. The classes that were for the first time brought into mainstream of Indian political and social system by Mahatma Gandhi's different movements. The minority, the Dalits, the Shudras, the Adivasis, and so on. Together, these volumes of Rethinking India throw light on various facets of everyday life. But to concentrate on the present volume, the present volume is, as Amarkant Sinha ji pointed out, is very significant. ये बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है क्योंकि ये न केवल हमें हमारे हेल्थ सिस्टम से परिचय कराता है, बल्कि हमें ये सोचने के लिए विवश करता है कि पूरा जो स्वास्थ्य प्रणाली है हमारे देश की, वो आम लोगों के लिए कितनी है. मैं दो बातें और कोई आगे बात करूं पुस्तक के बारे में, उससे पहले 2 बातें कहना चाहूंगा। पहली बात, थोड़े दिनों पहले, कोई 7-8 वर्ष पहले, एक किताब आई थी, एक इजरायली इतिहासकार हैं युवाल नोआ हरारी की, जिसमें उन्होंने फ्यूचर हिस्ट्री ऑफ मैनकाइंड, 2 वॉल्यूम है, तो पहला वॉल्यूम तो था हिस्ट्री ऑफ मैनकाइंड, पर दूसरा वॉल्यूम था फ्यूचर हिस्ट्री ऑफ मैनकाइंड। उसमें ये कहने की कोशिश की कि अब ये दुनिया फिर कभी विश्व युद्ध नहीं देख सकती है, क्योंकि परमाणु बम जब से आ गए हाथ में हमारे, तब से अब हर कोई हर किसी से डरेगा। पर पता नहीं वो कितने सच थे, ये तो पता चल पाएगा अभी जो तत्काल तृतीय विश्व युद्ध जैसा परिदृश्य बना हुआ है वो कहां जाकर ठहरता है। और दूसरी बात जो मुझे स्मरण आई वो है, एक स्वामी शिवानंद सरस्वती हुआ करते थे। वो गुरु थे स्वामी सत्यानंद सरस्वती को, जिन्होंने मुंगेर योगाश्रम की स्थापना की। मैं शायद अपनी सुविधा के लिए हिंदी में अधिक बोल रहा हूं। स्वामी शिवानंद सरस्वती ने अपनी पुस्तक के शुरू में ही बहुत अच्छी बात कही कि मैं तो अच्छा खासा फिजिशियन था, डॉक्टर था, मलेशिया में प्रैक्टिस करता था और खूब चलता था मेरा प्रैक्टिस। अचानक एक योगी मिले और उन्होंने मुझे भी योगी बना लिया, अपना चेहरा मुड़ लिया और मैं योगी हो गया। जब तक मैं डॉक्टर था तब तक मेरी जानकारी थी कि इस शरीर में 72,000 नाड़ियां हैं। अब जब मैं योगी हो गया तो मेरी जानकारी हुई कि कुल 3 नाड़ियां हैं, पिंगला, सुषुम्ना, इड़ा, पिंगला और सुषुम्ना। बाएं नाक से इड़ा और दाहिनी से पिंगला यानी चंद्र नाड़ी, सूर्य नाड़ी, और बीच में रीढ़ की हड्डियों के बीच से होकर सुषुम्ना नाड़ी। इन तीनों को अपनी श्वास प्रक्रिया से यदि साध ली जाए तो स्वास्थ्य ही स्वास्थ्य है। फिर 72,000 नाड़ियों के बारे में जानने की कोई आवश्यकता ही नहीं बचेगी। पता नहीं ये ज्ञान कोई एक इंडिविजुअल स्वामी शिवानंद जैसा या उनको पढ़ लेने के बाद मेरे जैसा बांट पाने में समर्थ है। क्या ये सरकार का दायित्व तो नहीं होना चाहिए? योगा डे अपार्ट, हम 21 जून को अभी योगा डे मना रहे थे, वो ठीक है अपनी जगह। रामदेव की चर्चा हुई, बाबा रामदेव की, मैं सम्मान पूर्वक ही बोलना चाहूंगा उनके बारे में भी, क्योंकि एक देन तो उनकी अवश्य हुई है कि योग को उन्होंने डेमोक्रेटाइज कर दिया। गांव देहात, पढ़े लिखे अनपढ़ हर कोई योग के बारे में बात करने लगे तो बाबा रामदेव के बाद। बाकी की बातें उनकी अपनी जगह पर जो कही गई उनसे मैं बिल्कुल ही विरोध में नहीं जाने की ताकत रखता हूं। ऐसे में जो महत्वपूर्ण बात अभी के डिस्कशन में निकल करके मेरे सामने आई वो ये थी, और अमरजीत सिन्हा जी ने उस बात पर खास जोर दिया कि सरकारी योजनाएं, सरकारी सोच, सरकारी क्रियाकलाप पीपल सेंट्रिक होने चाहिए। लोगों के प्रति, लोगों की ओर कैसे उन्मुख हो सारा हेल्थ सर्विसेज, ये सोच जब तक नहीं आएगी तब तक कोई लाभ मिल पाना मुश्किल है। केरल और बिहार के उदाहरण से उन्होंने कहा कि परसेप्शन में हम अनइक्वल हैं। परसेप्शन है कि केरल वाले सब समझते हैं, बिहार वाले कुछ नहीं समझते हैं, या इस तरह की कोई बात। पर होनी चाहिए हमारे बीच में इक्वालिटी, उस अर्थ में भी जिस अर्थ में अमरजीत सिन्हा जी बात कर रहे थे। तो ये कौन करेगा? पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज की बात हुई और अब तो सरकारों की भी बात होती है, तो बात वहीं पर रह जाती है कि वोट कितने आएंगे, कहां से आएंगे, इसके लिए किसको किसको अपने नियंत्रण में लेना है। ओवर सेंट्रलाइजेशन की बात हुई, उसी की दिशा में हमारे सारे प्रयत्न लग रहे हैं, और उससे अगर बच गए कहीं तो फिर नारेबाजी में डूब जाते हैं हम। हमने अच्छे से अच्छे काम को नारों में बदल के छोड़ दिया है। काम अपनी जगह रह जाता है, नारा महत्वपूर्ण हो जाता है। मैं उदाहरण देकर के इसके स्पष्ट नहीं करूंगा, क्योंकि मुझे लगता है ये बात अपने आप में बहुत स्पष्ट है। मैंने पुस्तक पढ़ी, जैसा मैंने कहा कि मैंने तेजी से पढ़ी है, इसलिए मैं ये नहीं कह सकता हूं कि वस्तुतः पढ़ ली है, लेकिन पढ़ी है मैंने ये पुस्तक और मैं बहुत प्रभावित हुआ। और इस पुस्तक के माध्यम से ही मैं रीथिंकिंग इंडिया सीरीज से भी परिचित हो सका। मैं इस बात को मानने में कोई ऐतराज नहीं है कि मैं इससे परिचित नहीं था इसके पहले, पर इस पुस्तक को पढ़ने के बाद, उसके संपादकीय को और कई सारे लेखों को पढ़ने के बाद, दो विडंबनापूर्ण बातें मेरे सामने में आई। पहले, कि हम एक ऐसा राष्ट्र हैं जिसकी महत्वाकांक्षा है ग्लोबल सुपर पावर बनने की। और सिर्फ महत्वाकांक्षा नहीं है, शायद कभी कभी हम बोस्ट भी करते हैं, हम दम्भ भी भरते हैं कि हम तो सुपर ग्लोबल पावर हैं। पर क्या यह विडंबना नहीं है कि ऐसे सुपर ग्लोबल पावर का दम्भ भरने वाला देश के सैकड़ों हजारों मेडिकली ट्रेन्ड पीपल आज अमेरिका और इंग्लैंड जैसे देशों को, बल्कि दूसरे तमाम विकसित देशों को सहारा दे रहे हैं उनके हेल्थ केयर को खड़ा करने में, उनके हेल्थ केयर को बनाए रखने में। हम अपने देश में उनका लाभ नहीं ले सकते हैं। ये कौन करेगा? कहां से ये नीतियां बनेंगी? दूसरी बात, जो दूसरी विडंबना, दूसरी आयरनी मेरे सामने आई, वो ये मैंने लिखने की कोशिश की लेकिन लिख भी नहीं पाया ठीक से। कि हम बातें तो बड़ी बड़ी कर रहे हैं, विश्व गुरु हैं, हम कुछ भी कर सकते हैं, हम सुपर ग्लोबल पावर हैं, लेकिन हम अपने देश के लोगों को, एक बहुत अच्छी बात आई कई लोगों की बातों में, लहरिया जी की भी बातों में, औरों की बातों में भी, आम जन की छोड़िए, मैं तो दावा कर सकता हूं कि पढ़ा लिखा हूं, एमए पीएचडी वगैरह हूं, बहुत दिनों तक पढ़ाया। यह और बात है कि आज की विद्वत्तापूर्ण परिचर्चा के सामने मैं अपनी पढ़ाई लिखाई को बहुत बौना पा रहा हूं। लेकिन उसके बावजूद मैं ये कहना चाहूंगा कि जो थोड़ी बहुत पढ़ाई की उसके आधार पर कि हम क्यों ऐसी प्रणाली विकसित नहीं कर पा रहे हैं कि अनपढ़ को कौन कहे, मुझ जैसा पढ़ा लिखा भी ये जान पाए कि हम अगर स्वास्थ्य के मामले में कोई मदद चाहते हैं तो कहां जाएं, किसको गुहार लगावें, ये नहीं जानते हैं हम। कभी पढ़ लेते हैं अखबार में, समाचार के माध्यमों से कि अब तो एम्स में सीनियर सिटीजन्स के लिए, मैं सीनियर सिटीजन हूं, मेरी आयु 80 से ऊपर है, पढ़ लेता हूं तो खुशी होती है, पर समझ नहीं पाता हूं कि फिर एम्स में कौन मेरे लिए लाइन लगा देगा, कौन मेरे लिए वहां से अपॉइंटमेंट ग्रहण कर लेगा। पता नहीं ये बातें कौन सोचेगा। मैं अपने ही संदर्भ से बोल रहा हूं, क्योंकि बहुतों के संदर्भ से बोलने की क्षमता अब रही भी नहीं और समझ भी नहीं पाता हूं बहुत सारी बातें। तो एक बात तो ये कि सिस्टम, पब्लिक सिस्टम, जो दिन प्रतिदिन हम देख रहे हैं, जिसका क्षरण होता जा रहा है। एक विश्वास होता था, हम जब सड़कों पर चलते थे, मैं अपने बचपन और मैं एक अच्छे स्कूल में पढ़ता था, और वहां से जब मैं निकला था तो छुट्टियों में गांव जाता था, तो कभी चौराहे पर पहुंच गया और वहां बहुत कॉन्फिडेंटली, बहुत विश्वासपूर्वक खड़े ट्रैफिक पुलिस से पूछता था कि भैया मैं फलानी जगह जाना चाहता हूं, कैसे जाऊंगा, और वो बताता था। आज उस पुलिस वाले के पास जाने में डर लगेगा। पता नहीं वो हमारा जेब खाली करा ले या हमको किसी दूसरी ओर भटका दे, क्योंकि कई पुलिस वालों के नाम आते रहते हैं कि वो सरगना हैं फलाने गैंग के। मैं किसी पर टिप्पणी करना नहीं चाह रहा हूं, मैं ये कहना चाह रहा हूं कि जिनके हाथों में गवर्नेंस है, ये दायित्व तो उनका ही होना चाहिए कि वो लोगों को इस काबिल बना सकें कि वो जान सके, वो विश्वास कर सके पब्लिक सिस्टम से रिलेटेड जो भी है। जैसे आज आजीविका दीदियों की बात की गई है, थोड़ा तो विश्वास बिहार उन्होंने जगाया है, पर थोड़ा ही क्यों नहीं पूरा विश्वास जगाया जा सकता है? कैसे होगा ये सिर्फ मोरालिटी और एथिक्स का क्वेश्चन नहीं है। कहीं ना कहीं डे टू डे लाइफ में हमने जिस तरह से राजनीति को और हर विषय को व्यापार बना डाला है, उसने संभवतः ये बुराई ला खड़ी की है। तो इससे बचने का उपाय क्या होगा? इस पुस्तक की जितनी सराहना की जाए उतनी कम है, क्योंकि इस पुस्तक ने आज जो बातें हम कर पा रहे हैं उन बातों को करने के लिए हमें प्रेरित किया, उन बातों को करने के लिए हमें विवश किया। मुझे कहने के लिए बहुत सारी बातें नहीं है, फिर भी कह गया कुछ न कुछ, क्योंकि अध्यक्षीय भाषण के नाते कुछ तो बोलना था। पहला पोर्शन जो था अध्यक्षीय क्रियाकलाप का कि एक एक वक्ता को बुलाया जाए, तो वो तो मैंने टाल दिया अपने निदेशक रमन जी पर इसको मैं कैसे टालता किसी और पर, तो इसलिए बोलने को व्यवस्था बोला, पर बड़ा अच्छा लगा। मैं सब हिमालयन रिसर्च इंस्टीट्यूट पूर्णिया के अध्यक्ष के नाते ही आज प्रिजाइड कर रहा हूं, अपनी किसी योग्यता के नाते नहीं, और उस नाते मैंने अध्यक्ष होने के नाते मैं बड़ा ही आह्लादित हूं आप जैसे बड़े लोगों को परिचर्चा में भाग लेता हुआ देखकर। मैं एक एक का नाम भी ले चुका हूं, पहले तो नाम ले ही लिया है, पर जिनका नाम छूट भी गया हो वो माफ करेंगे। मैं कह रहा हूं कोई छोटा नहीं था, बड़ा हर कोई था, और इतना बड़ा था कि उसका था पाना मुश्किल है। मैं लंबाई में काफी ऊंचा हूं, लेकिन आज मैं अपने आप को बौना महसूस कर रहा था। इतनी अच्छी बातों को सुनकर मुझे लग रहा था कि काश मैं भी इतनी ही बातें जानता होता। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आप लोगों को, और मेरा अनुरोध रहेगा आप सबों से कि आप सब इसी तरह हमारी संस्था से संबंध बनाए रखिए। मैं अपनी ओर से पहले धन्यवाद दे लेता हूं, यदि कोई विधिवत धन्यवाद देने का कार्यक्रम होगा तो रमन जी बताएंगे, पर मैं अपनी ओर से आप सबों का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करता हूं। मैं धन्यवाद करता हूं मनीन्द्र जी का, खासतौर से वो हमारे अपने हैं, हमारे छोटे भाई की तरह हैं, बड़े विद्वान हैं, और वो बराबर हम लोगों को आप जैसे लोगों से जोड़ने की चेष्टा करते रहते हैं। इसके लिए मैं धन्यवाद देता हूं अपने निदेशक रमन जी को, जिन्होंने बड़ी ही कुशलता से आप सबों को जोड़कर रखा और आज का ये कार्यक्रम संपन्न किया। एक बार फिर से आप सबों का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। रमन जी, यदि धन्यवाद ज्ञापन का अलग से कोई कार्यक्रम है तो कर लें, अन्यथा मेरी ओर से
थैंक यू सर,
समाप्ति की घोषणा की जा सकती है।
Thank you very much, sir. We extend our heartfelt thanks to the two editors and the authors of the book for bringing about such a fabulous work in public domain. A sincere gratitude to all the panelists for sharing their views on the book, in-depth analysis of the subject matter, and add-on from their own field experiences. We are profoundly thankful for our today's chair, Professor Ratnewshwar Mishra ji, and octogenarian, for being with us and guiding and enlightening us in spite of not being in best of his health. Deep appreciation for Professor Manish.
एक मिनट, आई एम सॉरी टू इंटरवीन। मैंने जो युवा नोआ हरारी वाली बात कही थी वो अधूरी ही छोड़ दी थी। अचानक मुझे याद आया कि उन्होंने ये तो कहा कि अब तृतीय विश्व युद्ध नहीं होगा। उन्होंने एक दूसरी बात भी कही उस पुस्तक में कि कोई महामारी अब नहीं फैल सकती है इस दुनिया में, सारी दवाएं हमें उपलब्ध हो गई हैं। पर जब कोविड फैला, उनकी किताब आने के बाद कोविड फैला, अब वो कहें कि वो क्या कहते हैं, महामारियां क्यों फैलती हैं, क्या वुहान के भीगे मुल्क से वायरस निकल के आ जाता है या किसी की लेबोरेटरी से वायरस निकल के आता है, ये पता करें वो। और ये विश्व युद्ध होगा कि नहीं, उस पर तो मैं बोल गया था। आई एम वेरी सॉरी रमन जी टू हैव इंटरप्टेड, प्लीज।
नहीं, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं सर। Deep appreciation for Professor Manindranath Thakur, Engineer Rajesh Chandra Mishra, the Secretary of Himalayan Research Institute, and all the member of SHRI for making these kinds of programs happen regularly. Our warmest thanks to all our audience for joining us and being with us for such a long time. Once again, thank you to all and for joining us and being with the Shri. And we will always cherish